Janice, happy Friday. And to everyone who is joining us, this is a very interesting topic of the conversation today with you. I know you've had a very busy morning because you had a flight to catch, and you did with a bit of a delay. So you just got into your hotel room. So I'm so glad that you could make it. And for everyone else for joining us, I'm Anna Samkova, and I'm not just hosting Spotlight Fridays full time. I actually work with retailers to help them on their customer strategy and how to propel their sustainable growth through customer strategies as well. And it is my absolute pleasure to put a spotlight on all the amazing, wonderful professional people in our beautiful community. And today is Janice. Janice, welcome to Spotlight Fridays.
Oh, thanks, Anna. I appreciate you welcoming me and joining for today's session.
Well, we had a conversation a few months ago. We got introduced to each other by no one other but Saul Cropman. And I remember him saying to me, "You two have to connect." And we did because I always do what Saul tells me to do. And at that point, I think you were not sure if it's going to be a fractional role or not. And now you're absolutely everywhere. You are well recognized and well regarded in the industry as well for everything what you do. And I think I would love to unpack this topic of in-house marketing, outsourcing, how much outsourcing, fractional, not fractional, and everything in between. So we'll go through a few questions if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Let's go for it. So, when does bringing marketing in house make sense? And when do you think it is an absolute trap?
Mm. So I might share firstly the scenarios that I've been in. And I'm not quite sure what type of backgrounds we've got in our listeners, but anyone starting, whether you're in a typical brand or marketing role, whether it's mid-tier, and I've had these situations even when I was in senior brand manager roles all the way to marketing manager and marketing director roles, and even now as a fractional CMO, I have still been thrown the problem, can we bring a lot of our content or comms or digital and branding in-house? We know the brand better than anyone, and it ends up being cheaper. So I have thrown that question multiple times. And I think the first piece is I would advise any in-house marketers sitting there being thrown this challenge is firstly take a breath and think about what is it that the business needs from you. Because every time I've been thrown this question or I've been gifted the teams, I've realised one of the biggest things I've learned was understanding what they need now and then the impact on the decisions we're making in the longer term. I'm talking about at least 3 to 5 years. Because one of the most challenging pieces in an in-house function, and the last role I had in a multinational health and wellness company was leading the full service in-house agency team. So I'm talking about creative services all the way to packaging design, digital operations, all the way to lifecycle marketing and e-commerce. And I guess the biggest challenge, even when you get to that larger model and you're quite resourced up, is that you have to be able to maintain the rhythm and also maintain the creativity and keep your finger on the pulse of what is new and happening. And with the fragmentation of omnichannel, the biggest challenge is not just in any head of role or marketing director role, your whole team needs to be on top of what those opportunities are. So I always start whenever I get asked or there's a direction to cut cost or reduce cost base or an appetite to kind of own the function in-house, I start unpacking the why. I would sit down my stakeholders, unpack the why. And then the second piece is I would work with my team to unpack their capabilities, the structure available, and then the resource pool. Because I think I had someone comment on my LinkedIn page around the cost base of doing both. It can reduce costs or it can cost more. And that really depends on whether you're looking at the right structure and also understanding workload and capabilities within the team. Because over time, as your workload increases, and I'm talking about, let's just start with a very basic view of number of channels and number of pieces of content. What most businesses and marketing teams don't see is the technical capability you need from a team that was looking at content and channel fragmentation probably half the size to what it is in 3 years' time. They're looking at a completely different structure, a completely different talent model. And then when you're hiring, when you're a lot smaller to when you're scaling and growing, you also have to think about how you stretch those people. Because as a leader, the last thing you want to do is make structural changes, right? We hire to grow, we hire to retain, we don't hire for redundancy. And I think the biggest challenge that most people, businesses don't see when they challenge marketers to make those choices around cost reduction and in-house is that they are also making people and cultural changes. And that would be my first advice is understand what culture and change you need, forecast the growth of the business and what the department needs to sustain that growth, and understand the why, because it might not deliver the outcome they need now, or it might be a pathway for growth to get to that cost initiative if it becomes relevant.
This is a brilliant framework, and I could have asked you 25 questions in between. But my comments to that is always it could be a false economy as well, because what is the cost of the lost opportunity? What is the cost of not doing it? And then the whole team structure as well. So when you were a startup and required that the hustle culture and everyone's doing everything all at once and in between, that's one thing. But if you set up to scale at growth, you need a very different skill to sustain that as well. So I totally agree, and it's a good idea to start with the why. I mean, we all love Simon Sinek's start with the why concept, and I think it's a great foundation because we tend to, as the businesses grow, we tend to add more complexity to it. I spoke to someone about it at the Retail Awards last night. Uh, this week is just packed with different events, which is amazing because so many people and teams and businesses get recognized for all the amazing work that they do. But this particular retailer that I spoke to, they have 200 plus stores. And we mentioned the same thing. We just overcomplicate things. Let's just go back to basics and let's just all just do retail. Retail is not complicated. It's not that hard to do. When we actually know that all we need to do is look after customers, understand what they need, but also make it commercially viable. But yes, well done. I love that you mentioned everything, the business objectives, the why, the current structure, the future growth as well, because everything needs to be taken into consideration. This is not a decision to make on the fly. So what's the biggest mistake you see when brands make this shift?
Hire people too quickly and also hire for what they need rather than stretch. And I'll use an example. So I'll take the creative function as an example because I think that is probably one of the best examples where I even caught up with a CMO recently where they shared personally their regret around moving too fast because they lost the think tank they had with that external agency, and they're quite a large multinational. When you make those changes, there's a couple of things that happens. Firstly, you do end up letting go a agency partner that has built really strong know-how and can move at speed and pace and has the robust resourcing pool. That's their strength, right? And also understanding what is, and they keep their fingers on the pulse of what's happening regularly because they touch multiple businesses and multiple brands. That's the first piece. The second piece is you're also making sure that your existing team fits within a structure, and then you're hiring because generally in a creative function, you normally would start with a couple of graphic designers, and they are good at certain areas. But if you get all-rounders, they might not necessarily be strong at packaging, but they might be strong at comms. They might be strong at idea generation, but they might not have the sharp expertise of finish artwork, right? So that's the beauty of an external agency is they have those specialists siloed, but because they've got the client pool, they can afford to have those individuals. And I guess, that's where you look at a billable hours concept. And even with an in-house team, any department head or CMO needs to think and learn that billable hours concept because your headcount is the same as you're outsourcing the work. And in this instance, in creative teams is when you're in a mid-sized business, and I'll use an example that I went through in health and wellness, you have exceptional talent that understands the brand. They also are really good in their functions. But when you start to stretch them, and we had this challenge, we realised we didn't have the internal capabilities to deliver reels. But they were the strongest assets to drive conversion and retention. So the team needed to skill up. Now, what I did in that instance was I didn't break the relationships I had with the agency partners. I actually had a very open conversation around the why. I also made them understand that they will always be part of the mix because people leave. And usually when you're running in-house teams functions, they're the fastest turnover, and it doesn't matter what culture you provide. It's just the nature of a marketing function and a specialisation. So I was really clear they were here to stay if they understood our brand, and I was going to give them projects so that if we had someone that decided they were moving on from the business and they had a better opportunity, we could easily inject back this partner into our business and we can continue to move and deliver a plan and deliver to commercial outcomes. The second piece is they've become my training and development arm. They've been able to skill up the team, in this instance on Reels. We could build the in-house capabilities, but if I felt the team was uncomfortable, we would still have a certain level of retain agreement with this agency partner so that it was a pathway to growth. So I almost see it, why I always come back to see it as a talent and culture people development plan. It's exactly the same as how you grow your teams, how you build them for success, for promotion, and it's the same when you're kind of building that in-house function. And the biggest, challenge is the dynamics evolve so quickly. Like I said, the movement around people, the skill sets are needed. You need to have a very agile model. So I would never go in and help a business build an in-house function or evolve the in-house function thinking that they don't get any other support. I think that breadth of support is really important, and also being really honest. I think opening that honest conversation with your stakeholders in-house of why you need to keep a budget ring fence aside to outsource is really important. So that's the why. And then secondly, being really honest around the relationships that you have with your partners. These are the guys that are going to come save you when you've got a whole heap of people moving on from your team and you need to have a quick fix and a SOS. But these are also the people that are willing to lean in because you've built trust, you've had an open conversation, and you've also continued a working partnership, which is really important.
It's very well said. Well, communication is key. Transparent communication is essential as well, but that trust is an important factor because you build it over time. And once you have this trust, you can build a lot of beautiful things on top of it. So, how do you structure teams for innovation, not just execution, in this instance?
I like to always challenge in-house teams to think almost similar to commercial marketers, but I don't expect them to deliver that mindset. The reason why is it starts, and I just preface, I will still keep them being creative or technical as their first priority because that's their function, that's their role, right? If you end up pushing them to become too much commercial marketers, they end up thinking about profitability and sales, and then you lose the creativity. So I just want to preface that so anyone in the audience doesn't misinterpret what I'm trying to say. But what I have found is by educating the why. So when you're thinking, and I'll use creative because it's a little bit more isolated and it's easy to show the dynamics around return, because generally if you're in a digital role, you have revenue targets, right? So there's conversion targets that come through, or channel roles. But in creative, their roles are to be big thinkers. But I also find when they're in-house, if they don't understand the brand, they don't own the product, they don't understand why they've been given briefs and the outcome it delivers to return, you still have a disconnect around creative that's delivered from a bad brief, almost similar as if you worked with an external partner, right, through a bad brief. And that importance of understanding their role and the impact they make is really key. And it also reduces the complexity, because when you've got an in-house function, you don't have all those specialists. So one person will probably take up 3 different roles in a traditional agency model, unless the structure of the organisation enables you to have that headcount, right? And so by them understanding the reasons, and also you'll end up having non-marketers briefing in to studio. This is where they can start having those difficult conversations. If they're getting told that, hey, let's just do this because it's going to drive sales, and then they're losing their creativity because they're starting to ask the question, why are we doing what we're doing? How does it impact sales? Or how does it impact the customer journey or the customer influence, right? So it depends on what your objectives are, but they also understand the role they're doing. So they're not sitting there creating 20 ideas and a think tank. They have their stretch to look at ideas, execution, refinement, and implementation, because you're expecting more out of those roles. So being clear and giving them clear ownership, and it takes time to coach that into your team, and not everyone in the team will get to that at the same level. So as a leader, you have to be patient. You also have to empower leaders that are leading those functions. So if you've got a creative director or creative manager, you need to work with them as a CMO to build that understanding so that they become the voice with their team when you're not there to support them. And it's the same. If you've got a traditional brand team, you've got a digital team or an e-com team, no matter how you split it, each functional head needs to own some level of ownership around customer, consumer, and commercial. Even if it's not a revenue target, they need to understand those principles, because that's when they can start answering the why. When their team asks them, why am I doing what I'm doing? How do I prioritize my workload because I'm feeling quite stretched? And what ideas are the right ones for me to really focus on in my time, rather than working on too many different things.
I think, this concept of ownership, and I agree with all the questions that you framed before, but I think ownership is so important, and ownership definitely needs to be attached to every single role. And then the role of the CMO is to coordinate the whole process and the fluidity in between all these people that own in different function, and make sure that they all uh, work in as a unified function towards the same goals, and it's not disjointed, because unfortunately what you and I see on the market, that there are a lot of silos as well. So articulated. I love that, and asking those questions quite frequently is a very healthy idea. So what's the real role of agency partnership once you've built that in-house capability, or do you think it's different to it, and it depends on the organization and their objectives?
Yeah, I think it's probably more closer to the second piece that you mentioned. It depends on, I guess, firstly, how big's your budget, how many headcount you have, and it has been approved. The third piece is the amount of work and complexity of work, right? That's really important. And I'll unpack a little bit more about that using the creative example, because it's quite interesting. And then the last piece is the technical capabilities within your team. And as a leader, you have to assess that year on year, because it changes, right? And that's where that leadership capabilities and understanding how it cascades, not to your heads off and your direct reports, but all the way to the team that executes, is fundamentally important. I think that is the number one thing any CMO, if you're taking up an in-house team, and even if you haven't done it before, it's okay, right? But understanding that knowledge is so important, right? And I'll use the example of creative, right? if you're used to developing with external partners high-end video content that are pretty much ready to go on, let's say, close to TV or close to above the line advertising, that's a certain skill set and equipment your team needs versus if you're doing lo-fi reels, right? And then there's also the in-between spectrum. So besides quality, besides fit for channel, you also need to have a think about, does my team have that capability and are they resourced enough with the equipment they need? Because when you work with external partners, you source based on their capabilities, and if they don't have it, they source within a pool.
Correct.
And that's not the luxury, and that's not the luxury that you have. So I always tend to have a budget within marketing that I know I can flex depending on the complexity and the quality of work. And then secondly, like I mentioned earlier, preparing for changes within team. It's so important. And so that's why I come back to the earlier conversation. That relationship with your partner needs to be important. And it's not for everyone. I always start any existing new relationships with, hey, here's the vision that we have. Is this something that you're happy to come in and join? And if it's not, it's okay, right? But you also want to be very respectful, because when you're pulling work from them, and it's the same idea as, the business pulling marketing spend and sales spend, it's the same concept. You still got a business to run, right? So let's be respectful for everyone that's running a business, that if you want them to lean in when you've got that SOS moment, you should also be respectful in their business model. And I think the help will be very reciprocal both ways.
Yes, and this dynamic, again, what I've seen in the last couple of years being in that consulting space myself is that, again, we're leaning on trust here. Because once you build that trust over time, no one wants to protect their roles, because then they're looking at that external party as a threat sometimes. And then you can have a very transparent conversation around that you are just an extension of the team, and you are there to expedite their growth in a shorter period of time. Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit and speak about you being a fractional CMO and why you decided to step into that role as well, and what was the objective behind it? Because we can see there is a tendency to move into a fractional role for all the number of reasons that we all know, but I also think it's a big advantage on the market right now, because then you have access to this pool of very talented people that can just get in and get out and make a massive difference to you and the team. So I would love to tap on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So I might share what I enjoy most and what's filling my cup. The first piece is the portfolio lifestyle is not for everyone, and it's not for the faint-hearted, because you're building and creating at the same time as leading and I guess doing the work that you're used to. Right. And that was probably my biggest aha in learning. But it was like meeting people like you, very generous with your time, and a lot of people that have built successful models and shared what they learned. That was the first piece that was really important before I kind of thought about what was I going to do there. The second piece was I have this natural curiosity where I love to be stretched, and I feel very comfortable to be stretched across multiple areas. And that's what's filling my cup. So I get to solve the same problems in different sized businesses. Sometimes they are smaller than the previous businesses that I've been in, but they're the same problems. But what happens is, because you've been in different life stage businesses, and I guess my heartland is scale up and new ventures in medium-sized businesses, I can stretch anything under. And that's what makes it exciting, because you can move extremely fast and you don't have the restrictions and the parameters, but you do need to make sure you ask the right questions with your client base, because their permission is really important for you to move fast. And I think what is really exciting is the experience that you have in different businesses enable you to unlock and find the opportunities quite quickly. And because you're going in to support them either on a strategic level, so on a project level, or in an interim CMO assignment, which is what I'm doing at the moment is a mix of that in my portfolio. You have the capability to be able to support these businesses in a way that you probably wouldn't have in a full-time capacity, because you get the permission from the business to be able to stretch and think differently. You also have the ability where you leave your ego at the door. When you're in a permanent role, you have so many things to think about around culture, values, and people. And I'm not saying you go into a business and you drive yourself in like a tornado. That's not how a fractional works,
No, it
especially a
doesn't.
fractional exec. But you actually leave your you do leave your ego at the door, right? Because your role is there to unpack what the real problem is, solve it, set the business up for success. And if it's the right time, you move on and you either recruit for them or you set up and train up the team. So you're in it with a very different mindset, right? When you're in a permanent CMO role, you're there to build a legacy over 3, 5, and 10 years. So that mindset's very different. The other piece I really enjoy in this portfolio career is I get to do some really amazing things that fill my cup, and I probably wouldn't have the ability to. So the first piece is I'm also a practicing academic. I've been teaching at Monash Business School and Monash University across multiple units in marketing, innovation, and also support their internship program close to almost 2 years. And I wouldn't have the capacity or space to do that if I was in a full-time role. So I touch over 1,000 students in a year, and the impact I'm putting into their lives for these future leaders, it really warms my heart. Like I'm doing it for a give back, but it's also really filling my cup. The other piece is I've had the opportunity to talk to different regulatory bodies around training programs, and it's mainly because I'm stretching myself into different spaces. So you spark innovation in different ways. And I'm also working with 2 really incredible industry leaders to start a think tank. So, and there's a little bit more on that, but watch this space. But it's things like this where you just be able to build an incredible portfolio that fits you and is bespoke to you. But like I said, it's not for the faint-hearted. If you're someone that likes consistency, likes to know where you're going, likes to know that you are given lots of resourcing, that's probably not the right lifestyle choice, because you're actually building something from scratch, and you almost have to bring trust and credibility in what you do from client to client so that you get the resourcing support. And each time you recommend resourcing partners, which I do a lot in my role, they're all different because you're also tailoring it bespoke to business. So having that spectrum and I guess that network of trust, like you said, is really important. And it's quite different to when you're in traditional CMO or heads of roles, because you've probably worked with the same people for over like 15, 20 years, right? And it doesn't always happen that way.
You articulated it beautifully. Well, much better than I have in the last couple of years, but I can totally support that narrative that being in the fractional role, it's you're meeting different people all the time. You're meeting different skills. You have access to a massive pool of people. There are so many opportunities that come in your way all the time, and it's just becoming like, should I take this and should I take that? Does it fit with what I'm doing, with where I'm heading, with my values? Are we aligned? It's been an incredible space. I actually never thought that I will enter into that space. That now that I'm in it, I really enjoy it, and I have an incredible opportunity to meet people like yourself and work with people like yourself, and that's a privilege as well, the way I see it. But I'm so glad that you really what you mentioned, that fills your cup, but you contribute to so many people, and you're teaching in universities. build that generation that will be responsible for the future of marketing and beyond, and what it looks like. So your contribution is immense. I saw you recently presented to 500 students, and I could see why, because you're so well articulated, and you hold the thought process beautifully. I have one last question, because before we kick off, and I think we're going to organize another conversation in a couple of months, because I do feel like it needs to be a follow up. What advice would you give a CEO who is thinking about bringing a fractional CMO into their business?
First piece is, and this is the first question I always ask my clients, is what life stage are you in, and are you financially secure to bring someone in that seat? It's not about whether you can pay their bills, because a CMO actually ends up creating more of a cash flow and P&L issue if you can't sustain it, right? We are a growth engine, but we are also a cost center if it's not managed well. And I have met some businesses that are extremely interested in my skill set. I really like them. They're very good people. I want to lean in and help them. But then you get to a sticking point where you end up both ways creating an issue for the business if they're not really ready for that life stage yet. So I think that's the first thing I would advise CEOs is, have you got a good cash flow or investment stream in your P&L to bring in a heavyweight like a CMO or ex-marketing director that will come in and relook at your business and your team and provide recommendations on growth or change? The second piece is, how much growth and change are you looking for? Because if you're not clear, and what you end up wanting is someone to advise you on how your social media is looking and someone to run that, then a CMO is not really right for it, because you'll end up paying them much more and they probably won't engage them to be staying in terms of the complexity of work. And it will end up becoming a work stream that doesn't work for you. And I think that's really important even in any team management, right? If you're hiring someone that's too senior or too expensive for the function that you need them to carry, it ends up becoming more of a problem and and creates a hole where you go, you know what, marketing's not really working for me. So I think those are probably the first two that I would counsel CEOs to think about, and even business owners and investors. So a lot of the times, I get also approached by investment groups to kind of look at and assess if businesses are in the right life stage for them to inject investment and capital into. And I would look into that. But also, if you're a fractional CMO that you're approaching, or your fractional CCO, or whoever you work with is not asking these questions, they're probably not the right fit in helping you deliver commercial outcomes. Because a real CMO and a marketing director or a head of comes with sound commercial accountabilities, and they're there to help you deliver either your top or bottom line outcomes, right? And by understanding that, that's what they should do. And the other piece is, I would give them the space to thoroughly look at diagnosis, still have your hypothesis and your wish list, but give them the space to provide recommendations. So I had an example where I had a client approach me and they wanted to create one new brand and redevelop a completely new brand. The first thing I said to them is, how big is your business? And when they told me their revenue size, my advice to them is, I'm probably I'm probably selling myself short, because there's a lot of money I'm leaving on the table as an advisor, but you're not ready yet. If I come in and execute to plan to your ask, I'm going to run your business out. Those initiatives take a lot of time, take a lot of resource, and take a lot of money, right? And I knew instantaneously it just wasn't the right decision. And there probably weren't the right decisions that I would make sitting back in an industry role. And I think that's really important. If you give your fractional CMO or your fractional exec the scope to provide sound advice, I mean, it's your choice whether you decide to take that advice or not. I think you'll find the relationship to be more valuable and also add better value for your business.
Brilliantly said. I think asking the right and very practical questions. So thank you for sharing that, and also give that space to that person to execute on it, and just be patient around it, because I agree with you. It does take time. So it needs to be an investment in time and in the cost as well. Janice, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much. I've learned yet again a lot from you, and look forward to listening to this recording as well. And to everyone who joined us live, thank you so much. As always, happy Friday to everyone, and have a wonderful weekend. And we'll see you in a fortnight. All the best.